I didn't see it then. I do now. It's short but heavy. I adds my name to the internal list titled, The Cost. And then, I didn't expect the meeting to turn into a slap across the face, but it did, and the sting still hasn't faded. All I asked for, after 4 solid years of working through weekends, birthdays, and flu seasons, was a 6% raise. Nothing insane. No outrageous leap. Just enough to keep up with Houston's rising rent and the cost of eating more than instant ramen. I wasn't even asking for a title bump or an office with a window. Hell, I would have taken a new chair that didn't creak like a haunted swing set. I had spent the past week preparing the ask, printed out data charts, compiled client growth metrics from the accounts I'd salvaged, reviewed everyone I delivered in silence, nodding while Brent took the praise. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp. Brent, my manager at Ashford and Wolf Digital, rolled in late, coffee in one hand, unread emails in the other. He didn't look up until I was already halfway through my pitch. I kept my tone steady. Practiced. Professional. I was proud of that. What I wasn't prepared for was the smirk curling across his face when I finished talking. He leaned back like he was settling into some private joke. "If money's the issue, Clara," he said, barely hiding the sarcasm, "maybe it's time you tried your luck somewhere that pays better." Then he actually chuckled, like I'd asked him to buy me a private island, not pay me fairly for years of bleeding into my job. The sound of it stayed in my head, longer than it should have, as I sat frozen across from him with my hands clenched in my lap. That laugh didn't just hurt. It confirmed what I'd been trying to ignore for too long. Brent didn't respect me. He never had. My work, my sacrifices, my willingness to clean up every internal mess, they meant nothing beyond convenience. And it wasn't just him. The whole place ran on a fuel of unspoken loyalty, the kind that only flowed one way. We weren't employees. We were disposable plugs in a leaking system. I smiled politely. I had to. My throat was tight, but I said, "Thanks for your time," like I'd rehearsed it. Gathered my neatly printed charts, numbers no one would bother to read, and walked out of the glass conference room with a steady step. I passed Jolene from HR on the way back to my desk. She didn't look up. No one ever did when I came in early, stayed late, or covered someone else's last-minute screw-up. My desk wasn't even a desk. It was the corner counter next to the copy machine, complete with toner stains and the scent of overused office carpet. I sat down. My inbox was already packed with new urgent requests. Brent had dumped a new client on me that morning with the usual note, "I trust you to handle this." They always said it like it was a compliment. It never was. It was code for, "No one else wants to deal with it." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stared at the cold coffee on my desk and tried to feel something. Anger, sure. But beneath that, exhaustion. Not just physical, emotional exhaustion that came from being invisible unless someone needed a cleanup crew. That night, I stayed late again. Finished the campaign pitch Brent had forgotten about entirely. It was for a healthcare client, Arvora, that he'd claimed to own, but hadn't touched in weeks. I polished the presentation, prepped the data, and queued it for his morning briefing. No one would ever know who pulled the strings behind that success. Not even the client. By 9:10 p.m., the building was nearly empty. Just 3 cars remained in the parking lot. Mine, the janitor's, and Brent's luxury sedan parked smugly in the executive section. I sat in my car, staring at the illuminated windows I'd seen for 4 years. That was the first time I admitted something I'd known deep down. This wasn't going to change. I opened my phone. Out of some instinct I couldn't explain, I tapped into my long-neglected professional network app. Notifications were backed up, dusty with old messages. One stood out. "Hi, Clara. If you're ever open to a conversation, I'd love to chat. Your work on the Arvora account caught my attention. I believe you're being underutilized. Let me know. Janelle, VP Strategy, Crossbridge Interactive." I stared at that message. It was 2 months old. Brent's words echoed again. "Maybe it's time you tried your luck." So I did. I hit reply. "Hi, Janelle. Thank you for reaching out. I'd be happy to speak if the interest still stands. Clara." Her response came within 5 minutes. "Let's talk tomorrow. Noon. I'll call you." It wasn't much, but it was enough to change everything. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, but because I was wide awake with possibility. I kept thinking about that message, about Janelle, and about how strange it felt to be seen by someone who didn't even know me personally. It was like I'd been screaming into a tunnel for years, and finally, someone heard the echo. I showed up to work the next morning at exactly 8:12 a.m., as I always did, out of habit more than necessity. Brent rolled in at 10:04 a.m., winking at me like we shared some inside joke I never agreed to be part of. "Still here, Clara?" he asked, sipping a latte like nothing had happened the day before. "Didn't scare you off?" I gave him a smile that didn't touch my eyes. "Of course I'm here," I said, flipping open my laptop. "Busy day ahead." He didn't know I'd be taking the call that would change everything in under 2 hours. He also didn't know that while he slept through deadlines, I'd already reviewed 3 client budgets and fixed an error in the Arvora Analytics dashboard. At 11:55 a.m., I grabbed my earbuds and stepped into the unused break room on the second floor. No one ever came here, too far from the main floor gossip and nowhere near the snack cabinets. I shut the door, sat down at a chipped round table, and waited. At 12 p.m. sharp, my phone buzzed. "Clara, this is Janelle," said the voice on the line. Confident. Warm. Like she was used to making good decisions and rarely had to second-guess herself. I sat up straighter without even realizing it. "Hi, Janelle. Thank you for calling," I replied, hoping my voice didn't sound too tight. She didn't waste time. "I've been following your work since the Arvora campaign," she said. "That data strategy you built completely shifted the client's retention model. The precision in your targeting was surgical." I blinked hard. Brent had presented that project to the board without even mentioning my name. He'd taken credit for the structure, the segmentation, even the conversion tactics. I'd done it alone. Nights, weekends, retesting variations until the numbers made sense. "Thank you," I said carefully, not sure how much to admit. "Let's get to the point," Janelle continued. "We want you, not as an analyst or a quiet back-end lead. We want you as our senior campaign strategist." I swallowed hard. "That's a lot to consider." "It should be," she said. "The salary is 40% higher than your current one. There's a bonus structure, full benefits, and creative freedom. We don't micromanage talent here. We protect it." I exhaled. "That's generous." "No," she replied flatly. "That's fair. And we need an answer within 36 hours. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. "I understand. I'll call you tomorrow." "Looking forward to it," she said, then hung up. I stayed there for 10 full minutes, staring at the refrigerator humming beside me. I wasn't used to decisions this big coming from conversations that felt so effortless. And I wasn't used to people talking to me like I mattered. When I got back to my desk, a new email from Brent was waiting. Subject line: urgent. No body text, just an attachment and the words: "Can you clean this up? I trust you to fix it." That was always the pattern. Trust me to repair, to smooth over, to deliver, but never to lead. Never to be seen. I closed the email and opened the Crossbridge site instead. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt like something was finally shifting. That night, I called my mother. She'd worked night shifts at a clinic while raising me. She understood what it meant to give more than you got. After I explained the offer, she didn't hesitate. "Clara," she said gently, "wrong is giving your loyalty to someone who sees you as disposable. You didn't leave. They pushed you." I stared at the wall for a long time after the call ended. Thought about the birthdays I'd worked through, the overtime that wasn't paid, the weekends I didn't spend with friends because clients needed me. Thought about every time Brent called me his secret weapon when he needed a win, then erased me from the record. The next morning, I got up before sunrise. Made strong coffee. Typed a short, firm message. "Hi, Janelle. I'm in. Let me know the next steps." Her reply came 6 minutes later. "Welcome to Crossbridge. Offer letter and onboarding materials will be in your inbox by noon." And that was it. That morning, I walked into Ashford and Wolf like nothing had changed. Smiled at the receptionist. Nodded at coworkers who had no idea I was on the verge of disappearing. At 10:15 a.m., the formal offer landed in my inbox. I opened it slowly, hands trembling just a little. The salary numbers were real. The benefits made my chest tighten. But what got me was the phrase at the bottom of the page: "Your work deserves to be recognized." I printed the offer, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my tote bag. Then I did something petty. Or maybe it wasn't petty, maybe it was necessary. At 11 a.m., I knocked on Brent's door. He looked up, already grinning. Round two? More raise negotiations. Not quite, I said, and handed him the paper. He unfolded it slowly. I watched the color drain from his face as he read the Crossbridge letterhead. You're kidding. I'm not, I said evenly. He stood up. They're our biggest competitor. You can't be serious. You told me to try my luck elsewhere, I said, meeting his eyes. So I did. He tried to recover. This is a mistake. You won't last there. It's a pressure cooker. I've worked 60-hour weeks for 4 years straight, I said. I think I'll manage. This is betrayal, he snapped, voice rising. After everything I've done for you? I stared at him. Everything you've done to me? You mean? He didn't answer. I smiled then. A real one. Not kind. Not apologetic. The kind that says, I'm done explaining myself. Don't worry, Brent, I added. Tomorrow's my last day, and I'll make sure the transition is unforgettable. I got to the office an hour early the next day, not to prove anything to anyone, but because I wanted to walk through the building once more while it was quiet. Before the conversations, the buzz, the distractions. Before I became a story for someone else to tell. I'd spent more than 1,000 days inside that place. Some of them filled with pride. Most of them were just heavy, the kind of days you carry home and try not to drop in front of other people. But that morning felt light. By the time Brent showed up, at 9:58 a.m., latte in hand as usual, I had already cleaned out my entire workspace. My favorite mug was packed. The desk calendar with sarcastic quotes was gone. I took the framed picture of my niece at her 6th birthday, the one I missed because of a sudden client emergency, and slipped it into my bag. Brent didn't even look at me as he walked by. Didn't say good morning. But I noticed the stiffness in his shoulders, the subtle tension in his jaw. He was unraveling, and I hadn't even touched anything yet. At 10:30 a.m., I sent out the handover email. It was short, direct, completely professional. Just links to organized documentation, campaign histories, updated passwords, and final notes. I ended it with a line that said more than it seemed to. It's been a journey. Wishing everyone success going forward. I expected silence. What I got was chaos. Julian from finance was the first to reply. Wait, you're leaving? What happened? Then Kevin from client success. They're going to fall apart without you. Emma from the creative team chimed in next. Tell me where you're going so I can follow you there. I didn't reply to any of them, not yet. I needed to finish this the right way. At 11 a.m., Brent called me into his office. His voice had lost all the fake warmth from the day before. Clara, he said, like we were on the verge of something serious. I've been thinking. I didn't say a word. Just stared at him. Maybe I was hasty yesterday, he went on. I shouldn't have laughed. That was unprofessional. It took everything in me not to laugh right then. Instead, I let him keep digging. I've talked with HR, he said carefully. We can offer you a 7% raise. Retroactive to the start of the year. It's a good offer. Shows how much we value you. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He continued, clearly scrambling. If this is about money, we can match what Crossbridge is offering. I leaned forward just slightly. Can you match a team that respects me? A boss who credits me for my work? A culture that promotes based on contribution, not who you eat lunch with. He didn't answer. I'm not just leaving for money, I added, my voice steady now. I'm leaving because I was invisible here until I became inconvenient. He exhaled sharply, losing control. If you go through with this, you're burning bridges, Clara. No, I said, standing. You lit the match when you laughed in my face. I left his office without looking back. At noon, I got a text from Janelle. Just confirming, you're still good to start Monday? I replied instantly. Absolutely. Let me know what to prep. A minute later, another buzz. Check your inbox. Thought you'd like to see this. I refreshed my email. Attached was a forwarded chain from one of my long-standing clients, Riston Healthcare. A note from their VP read, We're disappointed to hear Clara is leaving. She was the reason we stayed with Ashford and Wolf. Please confirm who will be managing our account going forward. We are reconsidering our position. The email had been sent directly to Brent. I forwarded it to my personal email and hit save. By 3 p.m., I was in the HR office, signing exit paperwork. The usual stack: confidentiality forms, final pay acknowledgement, the generic non-disparagement clause. Then came the twist. We'd like you to sign this non-compete. the rep said, sliding a final page toward me. I actually laughed. Out loud. This wasn't in my original contract, I said, pointing at the clause. We're asking all departing employees to agree to it going forward. Just a formality. I pushed it back across the table. I'm not signing away my right to work. I'm leaving, not dying. They looked stunned, like they didn't expect someone like me, quiet, reliable, invisible, to say no. At 4:15 p.m., I dropped off my company phone and badge on Brent's desk. He didn't say a word, didn't even look up, but I could feel the heat of his panic as I turned and walked out for the last time. No farewell party. No awkward cupcakes in the break room. Just the sound of automatic doors opening, the final airlock between me and everything I'd spent years putting up with. The next day, Brent would be the one answering client calls. He'd handle campaign transitions he never bothered to learn about. He'd face questions he couldn't answer. I'd be nowhere near the fallout. Instead, I'd be walking into a new building with tall windows and my name already printed on a welcome packet. For the first time in years, I wouldn't have to justify my value. I wouldn't need to shrink myself to fit into a corner of someone else's empire. I had built something better, and it was just beginning. Monday morning hit different than any I'd ever known. I woke up before my alarm, not out of dread, but because I was ready. For once, I wasn't dragging myself out of bed to prop up someone else's success. I was walking into something I chose for myself. The Crossbridge building was glass and sunlight and quiet energy. The lobby was full of soft voices and efficient movement, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was sneaking in through the service entrance. My name was already printed on the welcome folder waiting on my desk. Clara, said the front desk assistant, handing me a cup of coffee, you're going to love it here. I already did. My new office wasn't massive, but it had a door and a window. A quiet space that felt like mine, not just somewhere I'd been temporarily assigned. There was a newness to everything, but not the kind that overwhelmed. It was like breathing in clean air after years of secondhand smoke. Before I'd even logged into my new email, a subject line popped up on my phone from a news alert. Riston Healthcare terminates contract with Ashford and Wolf. I opened it. And the article was short, just a memo leak stating departure of key personnel as the reason. My name wasn't mentioned, but I didn't need it to be. Janelle walked in just as I finished reading. She raised an eyebrow and held up her phone. I take it you've seen the news? I nodded slowly. That was fast. She smiled without apology. Turns out when you're the glue, everything starts falling apart once you leave. That made me laugh, but only halfway. I wasn't rooting for their collapse. I just didn't want to be buried in it anymore. The rest of the morning was full of new beginnings. I met the 3 strategists on my team, a bright intern named Eva, and a data scientist who reminded me too much of myself 5 years ago. Quiet, cautious, always checking to make sure she wasn't speaking out of turn. You don't need to earn your space here, I told her during our first review meeting. If you have ideas, speak up, especially if they're different from mine. She blinked like I'd just told her the walls could talk. I made a note to keep an eye on her. The right kind. By 2 p.m., my inbox was lighting up. Not from new clients, but from old colleagues, people I hadn't heard from in months. Emma from Creative sent the first message. Darren's freaking out. Riston's gone. Now biotech is threatening to pull too. Then Kevin. He just called an emergency meeting. You should have seen his face. I stared at the screen, feeling something strange. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't guilt. It was clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was just gravity. They built a house on silence, and then were shocked when it collapsed after they ignored the foundations. I didn't have time to dwell on it. At 3:15, Janelle called me into a leadership meeting with the executive team. Clara, said the COO, Riston has asked that you personally oversee the transition. They want continuity, confidence, and you. I blinked, stunned for half a second, then nodded. Of course, I'd be honored. And just like that, I became the face of a $4.2 million account. By Tuesday morning, Jennings and Wolf was hemorrhaging clients. 3 accounts had frozen their campaigns. 2 were asking about exit clauses. I watched from a distance as the damage rippled outward, not gleeful, just certain. This was always coming. They just didn't want to see it. That afternoon, Julie from finance messaged me. HR just announced layoffs. They're starting with account support. Everyone's blaming you. I didn't respond for a while, just stared at the words. Not with regret, not with anger, just the heavy understanding that standing up always has a cost. I finally replied, I'm sorry they're going through that. But I didn't cause it. They did, when they chose to ignore what their people were worth. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I kept thinking about Eva, about Emma, about everyone who had carried weight that no one acknowledged, about all the coffee-stained reports and the quiet sacrifices and how none of them showed up in performance reviews. The next morning, Janelle knocked on my door. We're expecting more resumes, she said, sliding into a chair. Jennings and Wolf people. They're looking for places to land. I nodded slowly. What do you need from me? I'd like you to help review them, she said. Especially for the Riston team. You know who actually made things work back there. Something shifted in me right then. Not power for the sake of control, but power for restoration. I'd be honored, I said. Janelle stood, then paused at the door. Oh, and by the way, Darren reached out. I blinked. What? He sent a message through our website, she said, shaking her head. Wants a meeting. Says he'd like to consult. Share insights about client landscapes. I exhaled slowly. What did you tell him? She smiled. I said we already have all the insight we need. Then, before she walked out, she added, her name is Clara. And that was enough. 3 weeks into the new job, I was standing at the head of the strategy table, walking a room full of executives through projected return rates for the Riston account. Every graph we'd built told a story of growth. Every number confirmed the transition wasn't just smooth, it was thriving. For the first time in my career, I wasn't silently waiting to be credited. I was the name in the brief, the voice in the room, the person they trusted to lead. Recognition felt strange at first, like trying on a coat I hadn't realized would fit so well. There were moments I almost apologized for speaking too confidently, then stopped myself. I had spent too many years dimming my own light to keep other people comfortable. That part of me was gone now. But the weight didn't disappear. It just shifted. Jennings and Wolf was still unraveling. By now, I'd heard they had lost nearly half their staff. Biotech and 2 other clients had officially withdrawn. I wasn't the reason, but I was still the story. One afternoon, I got a quiet message from Emma. She'd always been one of the most talented people I'd worked with, a designer who delivered brilliance without ever raising her voice. They cut my whole team, she wrote. I've never worked anywhere else. I just wanted to say I'm not mad. You did what all of us wish we had the nerve to do. That one stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. I forwarded her portfolio to Janelle the next morning. 2 days later, Emma had an interview with our creative director. And it didn't stop there. I started compiling a quiet list, people I remembered. Not the loud ones who took credit, but the quiet ones who actually did the work. Julie from finance, Antonio from IT, Marcia from QA, Kevin from client success. The ones who carried water uphill and never asked for applause. I searched for their profiles after hours, dug through old Slack threads and internal comments. I remembered who made the machine work while Brent took credit from the boardroom. Some joined us. A few said they weren't ready. 1 or 2 didn't respond at all. And one message hit me harder than expected. It was from Patrice, former accounting lead. You got your title while the building burned. Don't act like you saved anyone. I saved her message in a folder I'd started quietly naming the cost. Because that's what it was. Every leap costs something. Sometimes it's comfort. Sometimes it's a relationship. Sometimes it's the version of yourself that believed suffering in silence was the price of stability. A week later, Janelle and I presented the formal hiring initiative to the board. A proposal to create a pipeline for former Jennings and Wolf staff through mentorship, training, and transitional roles. Not because we owed them, but because they deserved more than they were ever given. One of the board members raised an eyebrow. Are you sure this is smart? These people come from a failed competitor. They weren't the failure, Janelle said, before I could speak. They were the solution no one saw. The board approved the initiative without another question. By the end of the month, 14 new faces had joined us, Emma included. Antonio rebuilt our internal systems within 2 weeks. Kevin developed a new feedback protocol that boosted client response rates by over 30%. The culture? Better. Humble. Real. And just when I thought the past was done with me, it showed up again in person. I walked into the building one morning and saw him sitting in the lobby. Brent. He looked like a ghost of himself, tired, thinner, clutching an old leather briefcase with cracked seams and a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Clara, he said, standing as I approached. I'm not here to cause trouble. What are you here for? I asked, stopping a good few feet from him. They say you're hiring people from Jennings, he said, voice lower now. I need work. I've got a family, a mortgage. You know how this industry works, once failure's attached to your name. He let the sentence trail off like a fishing line, waiting for sympathy to bite. I didn't speak right away. I'm not in charge of executive hiring, I said eventually. I'll take anything, he rushed to add. Consulting, training, admin, anything. Just a foot in the door. I looked at the man who once told me I was replaceable, who laughed at my raise request, who sent me scrambling to clean messes while he took long lunches. You said I burned bridges, I reminded him. He dropped his eyes. Turns out I was the one holding the matches. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just told him I'd pass along his resume. Then I walked away. And that was when I realized something important. I didn't need to destroy him to win. He'd already done that to himself. All I had to do was stop trying to prove I belonged in a system that never saw me. 6 months passed. Jennings and Wolf had lost 4 major accounts, laid off more than 60% of their staff, and quietly pulled out of 2 national campaigns. Rumors swirled about a merger. Others whispered about liquidation. I didn't watch with joy. I didn't watch with guilt. I just watched like someone who'd tried to repair a collapsing wall and had finally stepped away before it fell. My life looked different now. I had a door on my office. A view. A team that asked for my input, not my silence. My workload was still heavy, but not thankless. And for the first time in years, I was sleeping through the night without fear of being overlooked. One morning, I arrived before the rest of the building. I liked the quiet hours. They reminded me of the mornings I used to arrive first at Jennings, unnoticed and already tired. Now I noticed myself, and it made all the difference. I poured coffee, opened my laptop, reviewed a campaign draft from Eva. It was sharp, creative, bold. Her voice was clear in every detail. I made a note, no edits. Just excellent work. Before I closed the file, I saw a line she'd added in the footer. Mentored by Clara. It stopped me for a second. That line, that small, quiet sentence. It was everything I'd ever hoped someone would one day say. At 11 a.m., Emma stopped by my office. They offered me the lead designer role, she said, half in disbelief. I smiled without hesitation. Of course they did. I'm not sure I'm ready, she added. You've been ready for a long time, I said. You're just not used to being seen. She nodded slowly. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't left. So do I said quietly. But you did, she said. And it made space for the rest of us to believe we could too. That afternoon, another resume landed in my inbox. No note. No cover letter. Just a familiar name. Brent. He'd applied for a consulting role. I didn't open the file. I didn't need to. I just clicked Mark as read and closed the tab. He had already taught me everything I needed to know. Not by mentoring me, but by underestimating me. And that was the last mistake anyone ever made.